Greetings. It's 7 o'clock Eastern Time. My name is John Bell. I'm the director of the Ballard Institute and Museum of Puppetry. And we are very excited to host online tonight our puppet forum entitled Adventures in Jewish Puppet and Spectacle Performance. And this online forum is going to look at global forms of puppet and object performance that have their roots in religion and ritual that reflect Jewish cultural and religious practices. And it's very exciting for us because we have with us Jenny Romaine from Great Small Works, Steve Abrams, the editor of Puppetry Journal and an experienced veteran puppeteer from Philadelphia, and then our colleague from the from the University of Connecticut, Matthew Cohen, who recently directed and performed in Wayang Esther at the Mandel Jewish Community Center in West Hartford. Behind the scenes is our colleague, Emily Wicks, the manager of operations and collections at the Ballard Institute and Museum of Puppetry. We want to shout out to Matthew Sorensen, Matt Sorensen, who's our other staff person at the Ballard Institute. And we want to get going with this fascinating discussion. I think it's fascinating. I wanted to let you know, first of all, that since the COVID pandemic started, we've been doing a lot of programming online, which we've been really lucky to do. Things are changing. We're hoping we might be able to do more things in person, but we make our current programming free and accessible online. If you'd like to support this event monetarily, we would love that. This event and our workshops and our performances, please make a contribution to the site that Emily Wicks is placing into your feed, whether you're watching us on Zoom webinar or on our Facebook feed. We wanted to mention a number of events that are happening. It's been a really busy spring here. First of all, tomorrow night, Friday, March 25th at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, we are hosting our Yukon Spring Online Puppet Slam, which is going to feature work from Puerto Rican puppeteers, which complements our current exhibition, Hecho en Puerto Rico, 4 Generations of Puerto Rican Puppetry, curated by Dr. Manuel Moran and Deborah Hunt, and which will be up through June 11th. So the Puppet Slam tomorrow night is going to be hosted by Staff Shear, one of the Puppet Arts Program graduate students, and also Titi Gandinga, who is a puppet character created by Luis Villafane from Puerto Rico. And we're going to feature the work of Puerto Rican puppeteers Agua Soli Sereno, Poncili Creacion, Deborah Hunt, Marian Hopgood, Luis y sus Muñecos, also Compañía Alviera Salcedo from Spain, Lomigo Títeres from Mexico, and many Yukon Puppet Arts students. So that's awesome. Next week, see, we're getting tired. Next week is a big fundraising event for us at the Ballard Institute. We want you to know about. It's called Yukon Gives, and it's I think it's a not 24, like a 48 or hour period where we ask people to donate to the Ballard Institute. And we have a matching situation now. We have a generous donation from a donor. So we're trying to get as many people as possible to give a donation. So it doesn't matter how much you give, but in this event where we're trying to raise money, we're a public university with a lot of challenges. Please feel free to help us on for the Yukon Gives event, March 30th and 31st. And then we have an email list. If you want to learn about all the things we're doing, we send out very nicely unobtrusive mailings that let you know what's going on. Emily, I believe, is posting a site where you can sign up on our email list because we're doing a lot. And then our exhibition Hecho en Puerto Rico, 4 Generations of Puerto Rican Puppetry. We extended the run. It will be up through June 11th. And just in the past week, we've sort of learned that we can open up things a little bit with our museum, with the relaxed COVID restrictions at the University of Connecticut. So please come and see that exhibition. It's really thrilling and amazing and inspiring. So check that out. I think Emily's posting the reservation link. And finally, we are hosting a new production by Bread and Puppet Theater, the internationally acclaimed puppet theater company from Vermont that I have a history with, and actually my colleague Jenny does too, a little bit. There will be performing the new production, The Persians by Aeschylus. It's actually the first recorded tragedy that Aeschylus wrote. A lot of Greek tragedies are gone, but it's about war, it's about Greeks and Persians, and it's really interesting to think about in terms of what's going on today. That will be performed April 23rd and 24th in Storrs, Connecticut, outdoors on the south lawn of the UConn campus. We are looking for volunteers. If you would like to volunteer to be a performer in The Persians by Bread and Puppet Theater, you can go to the site that Emily's posting right now and get more information. So please come see that show. We'd really like to what are we doing? Celebrating theater in the age of COVID by doing that. So tonight, we're talking about adventures in Jewish puppet and spectacle performance, which is the title Jenny Romain contributed. I love the idea that it's an adventure. And global forms of puppet and object performance have their roots in religion and ritual that reflect Jewish cultural and religious practices, which me as a non-Jewish person is sort of totally fascinated and intrigued by. So we want to look at a variety of current and historical practices of Jewish puppetry with our esteemed guests, Jenny, Steve, and Matthew. And the way we want to do this is first have presentations by each of our 3 forum contributors, speakers, beginning with Jenny Romain, my colleague, and to a certain extent, my muse, my teacher, my guru. Jenny is a director, designer, and puppeteer. She's the co-founder and a co-founder and artistic director of Great Small Works, the Obie award-winning company, Visual Theater Collective. She's also the music director of Jennifer Miller's Circus Amok and artist in residence at Milk Knot Jails and Inside Change. With Great Small Works, Jenny performs, teaches, directs in theaters, schools, parks, libraries, museums, prisons, street corners, and other public spaces, producing work on many scales, from gigantic outdoor spectacles to miniature shows. She's directed and designed, and this is some of the more interesting aspects of her work, community-based spectacles for projects in New York City and around the world. She has a background as a sound archivist for the YIVO Institute for Jewish Research, which is an amazing place, for 13 years, and has drawn on Yiddish pan-Jewish primary source materials to create art with contemporary meaning. So I just introduced Jenny. We want to present each of our speakers in turn. They'll make a presentation about their work or their perceptions, their sense of history of Jews and puppetry, and then we'll have a discussion among our panelists, and then we want to bring you guys, y'all who are watching it, into that discussion. So first, we'll go right to Jenny Romain. Welcome, Jenny Romain.
Hi. Hi, everybody out there in the land of the interwebs. Thank you, John, for that beautiful introduction. I didn't know I was your muse, but you know, I know that your muse is also Grace Kelly by the way you wear pearls, so that we have that in common. What was I going to say? Oh, it's just a pleasure to be here. I'm going to share some work. I feel like a lot of things are going to get said tonight, and as the title indicates, these are just some adventures in Jewish puppetry. And just to say, my root in Jewish tradition is I come from an East European Yiddish-speaking background, and I was raised by Yiddish-speaking immigrant family members, and I went to Yiddish school, and I don't have a Zionist background. I never learned modern Hebrew. It's not my Jewish language. And I work with a lot of Jews who come from Ladino speaking backgrounds, Arabic speaking backgrounds, all different kinds of Jewish languages. And so what I'm going to share is this, my little piece of the diaspora. And I'm going to share some work that I didn't really address sort of the conventions of object performance in Jewish tradition, but what you'll see in the different examples are sort of puppet or object interpretations that are very tuned into cultural codes and meaning. So why don't we start with the first clip? It's from a show that I worked on with Adrian Cooper of beloved memory and Frank London. Here it is. And it's called The Memoirs of Glickle Hamel. And we can push play on that. And what you're seeing here is it's the oldest piece of writing by a woman in the Yiddish language. And Glickle was a businesswoman who would travel to all of these fairs where she would see. We'll watch and then I'll.
In the forest with her 12 children, or how to survive in exile.
So she was a businesswoman with 12 children.
Shalom Aleichem. Wir haben verdient $800
Good Mordecai.
And another thing,
Yes.
I'm engaged to be married in 6 months.
Mazel tov. But when are you going back to Danzig to buy more pearls?
I won't.
Won't?
I intend to stay in Germany and buy wine.
Fine.
Yep.
I want nothing to do with that business.
Too bad. I remain firm.
Geld her, Jude, oder ich schieße. Was zögerst du? Sag ja oder nein.
Thus the stout and honest lad came to an early grave, and instead of celebrating his wedding, he crept into the black of the earth.
Und jetzt, Rabbi Seid, sie wickelt sich weiter unser Koschmar, unser Nischfakaiden gedacht Säuen.
We prolong our nightmare with a performance by a real historical personage who performed in the living room of rich German burghers at the time of Jewish emancipation in
In
Germany.
jene Tag von Haskolle.
Like she said, in the 1720s. In his act, he dressed up like a Jewish woman,
A jüdische Tochter.
trying to pass for a German woman,
A Deutschke.
and failing miserably.
Verfallen. Und jetzt, unser Allemens Nischfakaiden gedacht Säuen, der Künstler allein,
Albert Alois Ferdinand de Verne!
Great. We could just leave it here for a second, Emily. So I just want to explain what you just saw. Glickle Hamel was a business person. She wrote a memoir upon the death of her husband, and she tells all these stories about, life and doing business, and explains sort of how Jews lived in coin because they couldn't own property, and you know, what it was like to be called Goldschmidt, Goldbar, Goldstein, Goldman, Gold. These are fake names, you know, given to Jews in these different communities in Europe. And that giant pig that you saw, the Judensau, sorry, I'm looking at this message in the chat. It says, Emily, cut back to Jenny. Ah, you're right. Here I am. That though not Jewish in nature, though not performing a Jewish rite, this is an adaptation of a piece of literature by someone who was completely steeped in a religious life. And so the stories that she tells are completely outrageous, lurid Talmudic stories. And she talks all about her business trips and also dealing with the anti-Semitic, you know, environment in which she lived. And the Judensau was an image that would have been engraved on the stone bridges and stuff she passed all the time, which is a pig sort of suckling the, you know, Jews and the devil, like sucking from the anus of the pig, and the, you know, it's like a really gross anti-Semitic image. And so that's what that was her nightmare, basically. It's like, oh yeah, this is what I'm rolling around with in the day. And I think so she had 12 kids, so we represented them with the 12 cardboard cutouts, which are actually made by Claire Dolan. But so that was an example. One other say the style was the Shocking Ballad picture show, which is what Glickel would have seen in the 17th century when she went around to all these business fairs. She would have seen picture recitation or Benkelsang. So that's an object performance form, singing in front of paintings. Next is, I believe, the White Pajamas. And I just want you to hear a little bit of Yiddish. This is Meyer Kirschenblatt, the painter. And he made 100, or like actually 1,000 paintings of his small town before the destruction of the Jewish culture there during the Second World War. And he was a teacher of mine. So this is him, you know, talking to me and a friend. And then you'll see a show that we were commissioned to make for a paper theater festival in France. And what's interesting about it is like what's Jewish about it is the content and the music and the approach. The White Pajamas.
In ze kost maar heen auf Shabbos, das ist eine wichtige Sache. Ze kost maar heen, und ich kost maar heen, darf ausgehören, man gibt hin. Kost im Kohl, darf der hin sein fett, und man steckt daran einen Finger in hinten für die hin, sehe öfter doch du an Eid. Ob sie du an Eid, wir sagen inside the chicken, a Sach Eierlech, wenn man esst, und man kocht up die Suppe für die Chicken, sehr schön sehen, die kleinen Eier schwimmen herum in der Suppe. Das ist sehr Geschmack.
And then this is a story of Myers.
My name is Meyer Kirschenblatt. I was born in a small Polish Yiddish town called Acht. Everybody in town had a nickname. Our neighbor, der Schwarzerhiel, was a cobbler. Although he was a redhead, they called him Hiel the Brunette. Hiel the Brunette had 7 daughters. Every time a male child was born, something happened, and the child died. In desperation, Hiel the Brunette went to a holy Rebbe in a nearby town for help.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is one of those long Polish Yiddish, slightly supernatural journeys. I won't go on. You know what I mean.
Guten Morgen. Es ist schwer zu sein Aid.
Noch schwerer zu seiner Jedinne. Hier. Seid gesinnt.
So those are Meyer's paintings. Many paintings cracked into planes in a paper theater thing. So the paintings had achieved dimensionality through using a horizontally tracked stage. And the music comes from Yiddish films. As the thing goes on, it's in both languages, Yiddish and English. And it's available to see on if you look at the Great Small Works website, www.greatsmallworks.org, you can get a link to the full film. Okay, so that's a story out of history painted by a psychedelic painter. And the next thing I believe we have is, Wintergong and Other Cheerful Downfalls. This is about two Yiddish puppeteers by Great Small Works. It's our recent touring production. And what you're going to see here is their revamping of The Dybbuk, which was a play that was like a ghost story, but it also had the theme of spirit possession and sort of class conflict and Hasidism. It had all the good things, and it was extremely popular. And Zuni Maude and Yessel Cutler did a parody of The Dybbuk to sort of make fun of all the different directors that were working on this sort of ghost story, this lurid ghost story that even went to Broadway. So here is our recreation of their interpretation of The Dybbuk.
All around, from all sides, you can hear the mystical, ecstatic, haunting melodies from the Dybbuk.
Yeah, it's already taken possession of the Vilna Troupe and the Kaminsky Theater and all the theaters in Warsaw, Lodz, Lemberg, New York, Berlin, and
Moscow, the workers' state. It's Dybbuk mania. Why don't you do a Dybbuk about Dybbuk mania?
Yes, that's it, Esther. Let's do a parody of the Dybbuk. It has it all. Dealings with the dead, erotica, Hasidism, and horror.
I have an idea. You could have all the directors from the various troupes currently performing the Dybbuk be the rabbis that drive this Dybbuk out of Leah.
The Yiddish Art Theater, or Neighborhood Playhouse.
Or maybe the Vilna Troupe. There.
Brennt nicht. Halt sich ein.
Ich kann sich mehr nicht einhalten.
Halt sich ein. Halt sich ein.
Ich gefälle etwas.
Lea, du bist so wie ein guter Tonic. Geschmacker von Kreplech und süßer von Honig. Mein Lieber brennt wie Brand. Schenk mir dein Liebe und gib mir dein Hand.
Was für süße Wörter. Oh, Honen, nur der hat mein Liebe verdient. Andere kriegen eher seinen Hint auf den Wind.
Oh, Lea. Lea? Oh, Lea! Los op koppen der Mortam!
Honen, komm rein.
Lea, ich bin da, was hast ich gehe rein, kenn ich nicht da raus.
Come on! Komm rein! Komm rein! Komm rein! Au! In der Kalle ist rein a Dibuk. Oder in der Prosperity ist rein a Crisis. Sup to you. Uchnem. Uchnem. Yesh korazik. Yesh korazik.
Okay. We're not going to the Soviet Union. That's where they went in the play afterwards. But because they were paying Yiddish modernists a living wage at that time, so they really had to go. But anyway, I can tell you more about that production, but they were Yiddish puppeteers. Their theater company was called Modikat for their two names, Zuni Mod and Yossi Kotler. Very popular modernist marionette theater. They were communists, very playful, and they were popular all over the world. And we have recently done a show about them, which is pretty cool, and I hope you'll be able to check it out. The next piece is about Purim, which we're going to hear a lot more about. And I'm just going to, just roll the tape.
Great Small Works has also been at the heart of the Avtsalakis Spectacle Committee's diasporist, queer, abolitionist, feminist, anti-fascist, trans, and very, very maximalist Purim Spiel since its inception. A Purim Spiel is a traditional folk play. Our process lasts 3 months. We invite people into all aspects of creative work, from political education, dancing, singing, creating puppets and costumes, writing the show, and performing it.
It's a Purim emergency.
It's a Purim emergency.
Hi everyone, Jenny Romaine here at Emergency Purim Central. I hope you're all doing great today. I know I'm doing my best to feel good. Someone said to me the other day, they said, in one word, how would you describe how you feel? And I said, good. And they said, if you had 2 words? And I said, not good. It's a joy and laughter emergency party, people. And that's why Jafridge's Purim this year is called Emergency Purim! Emergency Joy! This year, like everything else, Purim will be different. We're coming into year 3 of this COVID pandemic. It's the end of the world, you could say. And people say, but how can you have fun at the end of the world? And you know, a good friend of mine, she reminded me, she's like, Purim is about the end of the world. It is about laughing so hard that you completely dissolve the moment that you're in order to feel a new sense of possibility. This is a technology of joy handed down to us from our ancestors. There are so many ways to participate. Number 1, you can get a hand-created costume kit delivered to your home.
And Emily, could you just quickly play that last? There's just one more little clip of Purim. It's just that little window that you had open. Yeah.
Emergency joy! Purim! It's Purim! 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 Emergency joy! It's Purim! It's Purim!
Can you make the screen a little bigger?
It's Purim! It's Purim!
Okay, so those are some examples of Jewish puppetry, which I include costume and spectacle performance as part of. So that's what I got to offer. Can't wait to see what everyone else has.
Wow, thank you, Jenny. That's so many rich, amazing things there in your work. It's really inspiring. Wonderful to see Adrian Cooper. That was quite wonderful. And even what happened, when was Purim? Last week? This what the ending with the performance in the streets of Brooklyn, I think, last week. So a lot to take in. Thank you so much, Jenny. We wanted to turn next to our second forum participant, Steve Abrams, who has been the editor of Puppetry Journal since 2015. And I guess I've known him for a long time before that as a puppeteer. Steve was the North American editor for the World Encyclopedia of Puppetry Arts, WEPA. If you haven't checked into the World Encyclopedia of Puppetry Arts, please do. He was the president of Puppeteers of America from 1999 to 2001 and co-artistic of the National Puppetry Festival in Tampa, 2001, vice president of Unimo USA for several terms. And for more than 40 years, he's been performing his solo shows, mostly hand puppets, in school libraries and theaters, and has performed a handful of puppet shows. And I'm very excited about what Steve's going to present, which I think is going to involve in part women in Jewish puppetry. So welcome, Steve Abrams. What a pleasure to have you with us this evening.
Hi, John. Thanks for having me. It's great to be here. So I guess I should start a tiny bit about me. I guess I'm the third generation of non-practicing Jewish people. By that, I mean, we didn't go to synagogue, especially. My grandmother was from the Ukraine, actually. She spoke Yiddish, but not to me. She only spoke Yiddish when she didn't want me to understand what she was saying, which was actually fairly often. But the holidays were important to us. We didn't go to synagogue, but we did Hanukkah and Passover and all that. My first puppet festival in 1970, I saw a puppet show of The Tale of Helm by two lovely women named Bea Geller and Ann Cohen. And it was the kind of show that I thought, oh, I can do that. That's kind of like the kind of stuff that I do with hand puppets. And a few years later, a synagogue called me up asking me if I could do a Purim show. So being young and thinking I can do everything, I said, sure. And I worked on a script and I got some puppets together to do the Purim story. And if you know the Purim story, the first part of it is about the king's wife, Vashti, who doesn't listen to him. So he throws her out and decides that he's going to look for another wife, or maybe wives. I don't know, that part's not clear. So that set up this thing for Purim that there's a beauty contest, a Queen Esther beauty contest. Supposedly that's how Esther was selected. So I arrived at the synagogue to do my show, and there were mostly 4 and 5-year-olds, quite a few girls who were getting ready to participate in the Queen Esther beauty contest. They were all costumed. And it was very clear that they were not at all interested in hearing the story of Purim. They just wanted this beauty contest to start. So they were not very attentive, and I didn't feel like my first effort was successful. I did a second show, Purim show, where they had the groggers, the noisemakers you're supposed to do when you hear the name of the villain Haman. And they had the groggers, and that made the show extremely difficult to do. So the next one, I said, don't do the groggers. And so, but they had them anyway. So I improvised the show, and I didn't say the name. I kept saying, it's like Voldemort. I said, he who shall not be named, that guy. I improvised all kinds of, and the kids were getting more and more. You could feel the energy build up in the room. And it's like, when's he going to say it? When's he going to say it? And finally, at the end, I said it. And it was like this explosion of sound. And it worked very well. It was a nice dramatic device. So I thought that Purim play was successful. Who was Jewish and not Jewish was never especially important to me, but I started finding out lots of things by accident. And since I'm a puppet history nerd, I realized that there were about 15 women, there were quite a few of them, way back in the old days, all born before 1916, who were Jewish. And so I sort of put together a little list of them, and we have a little PowerPoint about some of them. And the earliest one, so if we can start that, Emily, I discovered, no, not that, no, she's not the first one. There she is, yes. Emily Solis Cohen. I found out about her by accident. She's from a very prestigious Jewish family full of lawyers and doctors. And she saw the work of one of my heroes in puppetry, Remo Bufano, and came to him and asked if they could do a Purim story together. So she was not really a puppeteer, she was a writer. But this Purim play was created, and it was performed all around New Jersey and New York by Remo Bufano. And the puppets for that, which are quite lovely, ended up in the Detroit Institute of Arts. And she was only interested in puppetry for about 6 years. As it got into the 30s and there were more and more Jewish refugees, she devoted her energy to Jewish refugees. But she wrote 4 or 5 Jewish themed plays, including the Purim story. So and I got this information from her niece. Her niece was about 80 years old when she told me about her Aunt Emily, who she adored. So it was a very interesting interview. So then the next one, sort of chronologically, is Helen Hayman Joseph, who was quite famous in the puppetry world. She was one of the founders of modern puppetry in Cleveland. And I was Googling information about her, and a reference to the Encyclopedia of Jewish Women came up, which is the first time I actually ever thought that she was Jewish. She was actually only married to Mr. Joseph a very short time. They were married a year, and then he passed away. So I don't think she did any Jewish content shows, but she was a very important, influential puppeteer in the early days. So then the next one, I don't think we have a slide for Fanny Goldsmith Engel. I researched her, and she spent about 12 years in puppetry, and then she became a famous cookbook author, a Jewish cookbook. Florence Lowe was quite noted. She had a company called the Berkeley Puppeteers, and Googling, I couldn't find Florence Lowe, and a friend who worked for her said, oh, that's because that's her stage name, or that was her maiden name. Her real name is Gitnik. She was married to a man named Stefan Gitnik, a Russian Jew. And so then I found out a lot about her, and I met her daughter, who lives up in Woodstock, New York. Apparently she was very, very camera shy. So there's very few photos of her. And this photo of her was in her daughter's home up in Woodstock. And the Berkeley Puppeteers went from around 1930 to about 1960. So the next one I think is Lillian Oppenheimer, maybe. Yeah, not a real good photo of her. She's one of the ones I actually met. She got into puppetry around 1962. She was most famous for origami. She helped bring origami, Japanese paper folding, to the United States. She was a friend and mentor to Shari Lewis, and she had a theater in Union Square in New York. Very elegant, lovely, generous lady. And then the next one, do we have a slide of Milka Wright? I think, yeah. Yeah, I heard about her when they were doing research on the WPA, and she was a WPA puppeteer in the 30s, at first in New York, but then she moved to Florida and headed a WPA puppet troupe in Florida. And then we don't have one for Sarah Goldsmith, but this is one I know about from a puppeteer named Robert Rogers, now I knew Robert Rogers did a Purim show, and I knew he did quite a bit of Jewish material, but Rogers is not a Jewish name. So he's the one who introduced me to Sarah Goldsmith. When I finally got up the nerve to ask him if he was Jewish, and he said he was, and he told me the story that his family escaped first to Sweden, and then the Swedes had some kind of Irish maid, and that's how he became Roberts. So not a Jewish name, but definitely of Jewish heritage, and very proud of it. He does a nice Purim show. The next one, let's see, do we have this Cora next? Oh no, Dorothy Zakonic. So I don't think Dorothy did Jewish content shows, but the early part of her history is quite amazing to me. She was a Jewish girl born in Brooklyn. And when she was a teenager, she told her parents she wanted to make puppets, and she learned the art of wood carving, kind of exceptional for a Jewish teenage girl in those days. And at 19, she said she wanted to go to Europe to meet European puppeteers, particularly to Vienna and also a couple of other places, and alone. And her parents were of course appalled. And at age 19, she went to Europe. And she traveled around Europe for a year or two. Actually, she had to leave when Hitler came in to take over some of the countries that he was starting to come into in 1933. She kind of had to escape from Europe. And when she got back from Europe, she went to Hunter College, and she did a couple of anti-Hitler puppet shows when she was a student at Hunter. And then she went on to found a company called Cesare, which was quite successful on up until 1962. I never met her, but I find her story really, really fascinating. And she taught a lot of wonderful puppeteers, including Nick Coppola, who still runs a theater in Brooklyn, New York. So the next one I think might be Cora. Let's see. Next slide. Yes, Cora Baird. So Cora Baird, what her original name was Berlar, and she was a Martha Graham dancer, and she was in a play in 1937, directed by the famous John Houseman. It was a production of Faust, and Bill Baird worked the puppets of the Seven Deadly Sins, and he met Cora. They fell in love. They were married after knowing each other for about a month. And from 1937 until she died, she was Bill's partner, and a very important part of one of the most important companies in America, really. Bill was married before that. This is, can we have Evelyn now? Oh, no, that's Bernice. We'll get back to her in a minute. Yes, let's go to Evelyn. So there was a woman named Evelyn Schwartz who hung out in Greenwich Village as sort of bohemian. She just had an affair with Buckminster Fuller. And in 1932, she married Bill Baird and was active with him and his puppets for the 4 years that they were married. At one point, she said, I think Bill was more interested in the puppets than he was interested in me. And she went on to acquire several other husbands. One was Stephenson, who was an explorer. And then Mr. Neff was quite wealthy, and she became a hostess with the mostess in Washington, D.C. They were friends with Marc Chagall and so on. And I think there's a couple of more slides of her. She looks quite lovely. Yeah, there she is working on a Baird puppet. This would be in the early 30s. So people know that Baird was married. Baird actually had 4 wives. Then, okay, we can do Be Gay next. Yep. Next one. Next slide. There they are. So these are the 2 women I met in 1960, and their company was actually called the Be Gay Puppets. B after B. Geller. Gay had what didn't have the kind of meaning that it has now. And they performed in New York from the mid-50s till about 1976. And they did a Purim show at a puppet festival in 1967. Their humor was great. Their timing was great. Their scripts were very tight, not too wordy. They put on a really good show. And I did tour their studio once, and they lived in Bayonne, New Jersey, where they gave me the grand tour of all their puppets. So they definitely did Purim Spiel. And do we have any more? Is there more slides, or is that it? Oh yes, and Lee Wallace. So Lee Wallace was a charter member of Puppeteers of America. She was married to Alfred Wallace for a brief time. That didn't go so well. And Lee was also a modern dancer. So she and I that's in my background, and we became great friends. And she was an absolutely incredible artist. And as a youngster, she was quite a beauty. And she combined dance and puppetry in her act with her sister. And I think that's all of the slides we have. Oh, yes. Well, so to the present day now. So moving way beyond the teens and the 30s and the 20s and the 30s and the 40s. Sherry Lewis was born in 1933, and she's probably one of the most famous puppeteers in the country. And she's Jewish. And she did several, she never did a Purim show that I know of, but she did several Hanukkah pieces. And I think even a TV special about Hanukkah. And perhaps maybe as well known, maybe better known, certainly one of the most successful puppeteers of all time is Julie Taymor, who created Lion King. But when she was starting out in the early 80s, she did a production based on the Passover Haggadah. It was called, I think the title was Haggadah Chronicles or something like that. So she has definitely done Jewish related material. And I think that's the end of our slides.
Steve, did you want to mention Bernice Silver?
I did, yes. There was a slide of her, if we can go back. At the very first festival, one of the very first people I met was this short, under 5 feet, plump Jewish lady who I didn't know what the first festival would be like, if I would be accepted, how it would go, what these people would be like. It was my first festival. And she greeted me and became my friend and made me, as she's done with hundreds of puppeteers, comfortable. She had this exuberant, joyous personality. And I don't know if she ever did a Purim story, but she became really an icon to the field of puppetry and lived to be over 100. So, and there are others. And as I say, as I started digging, like there's a company called Waka Waka Puppets, and one of the founders is a woman named Gabrielle Breckner, and she's Jewish, and her father ran a Jewish puppet theater. And they did a very moving work not too long ago called Fabrique, which is set during the time, a Jewish person set during the time of World War II. And there's a lot of other people who have done Purim shows. Z. Briggs' mother was Jewish, and she's done Jewish content stories. There's a woman in New England, Anna Sobel. I mentioned Robert Rogers. Stephen Kaplan has done some work. And then there are all the puppeteers who haven't done Jewish, specifically Purim stories, but have developed work based on their Jewish heritage. Lisa Stur's grandfather was a famous cantor, a singer in a synagogue, and she did a piece about that. Mark Levinson did a puppet version of the Dybbuk. There was a woman named Barbara Aiello who founded the Kids on the Block series in 1977, which was to mainstream handicapped kids. It was quite a successful project. And she became a rabbi. And I think I don't know if she's rabbi now in Italy or in Israel, but anyway, she became a rabbi. So the more I looked, the more I found. Paul Winchell, who's one of the most famous, successful ventriloquists on TV, was a student of Gerald Magon, and his original name was Wilt Chbosky. So he was another puppeteer with a Jewish background. So they keep propping up. The more I keep looking, the more I find some more. And there's just a really fine heritage of people of Jewish background who have either done shows with Jewish content or just were really terrific puppeteers.
Thank you, Steve. That was really extraordinarily interesting. From many different perspectives. I know Jenny mentioned Eric Bass.
Oh, yes.
So great. I appreciate the way this conversation is increasing in its richness. And we wanted to bring into the conversation our University of Connecticut colleague, Dr. Matthew Isaac Cohen, who's a professor in the Dramatic Arts Department, specializing in global arts and puppetry, and my colleague from the Puppet Arts program, and just a brilliant scholar. He's published extensively in the field of Indonesian performing arts and trained in Java as a Dalang Wayang Kulit shadow puppeteer, which he's going to talk about. He was just completed the production of Wayang Esther, Barbara Benari's shadow puppet musical, as the Dalang for that show. Really amazing, which was a collaboration between the Puppet Arts program and Gamelan Son of Lion from New York City. And he also curated the associated exhibit Purim Puppetry, which is even now on display at the Mandel Jewish Community Center of West Hartford. And that'll be up through the end of March. Matthew is currently working on a visual history of Indonesian puppetry and associated exhibition, based on the Dr. Walter Ongston's Sir Henry Ongest collection of Indonesian puppets at Yale University Art Gallery. So I appreciate Matthew being here and his talk about his own work. Welcome, Matthew.
Thanks so much, John, for inviting me and for coming up with the idea of bringing the panelists together. I'm really delighted to be able to share in this. Since Steve and Jenny both opened with some autobiographical framing remarks, I could say that I grew up in a more or less observant home, not an Orthodox home, but a religious Jewish home. I went to Hebrew Day School for 6 years for elementary school, where I was exposed first to Mishnah and then to a little bit to Talmud as well. And then eventually, at the end of college, I went as far away from my Jewish origins in New England to study Indonesian puppetry. And I two further places in terms of geography and culture can hardly be imagined. But curiously, or perhaps it's a matter of fate and destiny, I found myself continually kind of finding ways that Judaism and this interest in Indonesia came together. I discovered, of course, that there was a synagogue in Indonesia, which I went to for holidays. I also was drawn to a cycle of plays, which were about the encounters of the Hindu Buddhist gods of ancient Java with the characters from the Judeo-Christian Islamic heritage, or plays about Adam and his meetings with the ancestors of the gods and King Solomon, and I found texts about Noah, and I became very interested in all these plays as well. And then from this interest, I found myself increasingly drawn to these plays and to Wayang, to Indonesian puppetry, as a site for interreligious dialogue. I became very interested in a musical play which had been written in 2001 by the late Barbara Benari, entitled Wayang Esther, a Javanese Purimspiel, in its first production in 2001. And I was invited when I was invited by the Jewish Community Center, rather Puppet Arts at UConn was invited by the Jewish Community Center, and a number of prominent philanthropists. I gravitated towards this production as a possible way of bringing together puppet arts with the Jewish Community Center, and this was a commissioned project. And I'd like to talk about this project at some length because I feel that it offers a really interesting model for how to for partnership and to achieve different kinds of aims within a collaborative production. I want to, as a way of framing and reiterating actually some of the things which both Jenny and Steve have discussed, to start with the exhibition element of this project, and then to go on and talk about the performance, which was part of this as well. I should say we were blessed by working in a really interesting building. The community center was designed by the architect Walter Gropius, as in the founder of Bauhaus, with a 400-seat theater and a large, beautifully lit gallery at the very center of the Jewish Community Center, and so that every visitor to the Jewish Community Center enters, and the first thing they see is a gallery. So many Jewish community centers around the country have a strong emphasis on sports. But here we saw that culture was really important in the initial design. And the exhibition was intended to provide an enticement to come to the show, background to Purim, and also an introduction to puppetry in a sense, showing how the Jewish Purimspiel, the annual plays performed at Purim, sometimes but not always enacting the Book of Esther, which is the biblical text which is read out loud in the synagogue, emerges in the context of Yiddish-speaking Eastern European Judaism, with earlier kinds of proto-dramatic or proto-theatrical rites, including burning of effigies of Haman, the villain of the story, processions, masquerade, which preceded the theatrical forms. And then the exhibition takes us on an excursion through different iterations of the Esther story by Jewish puppeteers for primarily, but not exclusively, Jewish audiences. And one of the first of them, interestingly, which I was able to discover, was an Esther shadow play with the figures explicitly modeled after Wayang Kulit, Javanese shadows. In a review of the company published in a German puppet magazine, it talks about how this company, husband and wife team, was instrumental in popularizing Indonesian shadows in Germany at this time. So you think, of course, that you're always the first one to come up with an idea, and then you find that someone was doing the same kinds of thing 100 years earlier. And many of their plays were published, and so you can study the text as well as background information about the performers. Muddecut has already been mentioned, as the first or one of the first Yiddish puppet troupes, and their first play was a version of the Purim story, Achashverosh, satirical version. And we have Eddie Portnoy's research to lean on and understanding of this production. Also mentioned as well by Steve was this wonderful production of In Shushan the Capital by Salas Cohen and Bufano. These terrific puppets are still survive and are in the Detroit Institute of the Arts, which I owe that picture from. And also around the same time, we see a shadow puppet version of the Esther story from, in this instance, performed by Paul McFarlane, but authored by Meyer Levin, who went on to be a famous novelist. Also mentioned already was the work of Stephen Kaplan, who was an advisor to the Young Esther project, and at the same time was reviving his production of a Purim puppet spiel, which takes the puppets and also the dramaturgical form out of the Budaishi Chinese hand puppet tradition to tell a satirical version of the Esther story. So these projects were being developed in tandem, and we were in regular Zoom contact with Stephen as he was rehearsing his own telling of the Purim story. And the exhibition also includes not only puppet theater, but also puppet toys, and also a video, an educational video done with puppets about the Purim story, the Esther story. So that provided visitors to the gallery with a set of cultural references, and there were also Javanese puppets on display. There were student work was being displayed as well, which was formative to the project. And we introduced as well the composer, lyricist, Barbara Benari. And in this original production from 2001, which was, the opera was written, or the musical theater was written in the wake of the wars in the Balkans, and had a very strong anti-war emphasis, particularly seeing the Book of Esther as a book about ethnic cleansing, the destruction of Amalek, which is part of the text, the Jewish commandment to wipe out descendants of Amalek, and Haman is described sometimes as a descendant of Amalek, and also the attempted genocide of the Jewish population of Persia by Haman. Both are ethnic cleansings and Barbara's understanding, and there are songs which are specifically songs of hate. It concludes very beautifully with the Vidui, with a song of lamentation, and which is part of the Jewish liturgy, a way of dealing with the terrible massacres which conclude the Book of Esther. In the original production, the work was the singers provide not only the songs but also the dialogue, and there were multiple puppeteers who were manipulating Javanese puppets who are cast in the role of biblical characters. So in this puppet here on the left is Abiyasa, a character out of the Mahabharata, a sage. This is Banawati, who's kind of a flirtatious wife of a king. But in this opera, they were cast as Mordechai and Esther. We took a different way. We worked with the original ensemble, the originating ensemble, Son of Lion, who had a very formidable task of reconstructing this work 21 years on, without Barbara Pollitt, who had died a number of years previously, for multiple versions of the score and recordings, which was a really formidable piece of theatrical or musical archaeology. And we decided as well to turn to one of the puppeteers who was in that original production, my close friend and former teacher, Kijoko Susilo, And I'd worked with him on numerous contemporary Wayang projects where he designed as well as worked as a director with me, adapting different kinds of world mythos. This is a version of Cuchulainn we did together. This is a Karatau based on Maori myths. And what we did was we located a visual source for designing new puppets, which was an 18th century Megillah scroll from Venice in the Hebrew Union College's archive. And here we see it actually in our display. Matt Sorensen, who designed the exhibit, made it into a cranky. Now, this is a semi-sacred text. It's actually described as both a letter as well as a sefer or sacred book. It doesn't mention the name of God, and so it has a different status than some of the other parts of the Bible. But we made it, we took that form of the scroll and made it into something people could play with and have that hands-on experience, which is how Purim plays operate. It takes a text from the past and it updates it continuously and makes it funny and relevant to the present. So here's some images showing the design process. From on the left, the figure of Mordechai holding a scroll. He's a scholar in the Megillah and the Book of Esther. To Joko Silo's designs, he was working out of New Zealand, which is where he lives. To the puppets as they were executed in Central Java in a workshop. To the final puppets which reached us via Federal Express. This was a source out of Italy, actually done by a Polish artist, interpreted in New Zealand by a Javanese artist, executed in Indonesia, and sent to the United States. So really a global and pan-historical project. From the very beginning, the JCC was interested not in marketing this as an opera, not as an avant-garde intercultural theatrical project, but as a spectacle oriented towards families. And that meant avoiding in much of the advertising, actually the title of the play, which they thought was doubly obscure. Nobody knew what a Purimspiel was. Nobody would know what Wayang is. And to emphasize in publicity that this was a child-friendly, interactive project. Actually, this publicity photo was me and my son. And got on board the preschool, which is at the Jewish Community Center, and gained the interest of the teachers to mount a Purim puppet making competition with each classroom creating collaboratively their different kinds of Purim puppets, which range from hand puppets to toy theater to shadows, et cetera, et cetera. And for me as well, it was an opportunity for our students, not only at the University of Connecticut, to collaborate with them and to teach them things both about working in community setting and also embracing and embodying the skills of a traditional Asian art form as an intercultural project. So here we see a wine workshop, which they did with Joko Susilo, where they're working with traditional tools, which he had imported from Indonesia. And these went on, these were actually part of the exhibition. There was a hands-on interactive shadow screen where children could come and play out stories among the different characters of the book. A model for our production was the Chicago-based Manual Cinema Company, which shows puppeteers in action creating shadows, and also a mix of the shadows projected on a large screen. And this was, the Manual Cinema talks about this as a way of giving agency to the audience and allowing them to make choices about what to look at and creating their own films, in effect. And this is how we proceeded with having me and one screen enacting the story of the opera, and with the student puppeteers on another screen. So I was using traditional Javanese figures here, traditional style figures. These are all new figures designed by Joko Susilo in a traditional style. And the students were working with an overhead projector and with human shadows as well. So these two different forms of shadows combined. And it was an opportunity for the students to sit and be, some of them to learn as one does an apprentice model, handing puppets and repairing puppets as need be. This is us in rehearsal, and you can see we worked with a wonderful lighting and projection designer, Nicole Lang, from the Yale School of Drama, to create this, what was called aptly a big spectacle, where we had working together a group of 20 performers, musicians, singers, puppeteers, assistants, stage managers, all collaborating, creating one story together. And I wanted to show just briefly, before I turn to some final remarks, a YouTube, just a 1 minute clip. Emily, do you have that up?
V'hana'ara asher titav b'enai timloch tachat vashti. Oh, my majesty.
So I just wanted to say that in our version, all the main characters speak in Hebrew, in the actually quotations or annotations of the Book of Esther, and their words are translated by clown characters who come out of the Wayan Kulit tradition. These clown characters do appear in Barbara Benari's original, some of them, but none of the characters speak in Hebrew. I'm using this. I was borrowing a Balinese interpretive strategy.
Your Majesty, these girls are so stunning, I promise you. You'll never grow tired. And this is no ordinary wedding feast, but a great rite of fertility. As you take each girl to yourself, so does your rule encompass each and every province, protecting it, enriching it. You will be to them as the summer rains, as an abundant crop, as a wealth of trade. Vayitav hadavar beinai ve'eseh. Oh, it is agreed then. Let the wedding contest begin.
Thank you, Emily. I'll just go back to my PowerPoint here. And just I want to give a few concluding remarks. This was, I wanted to talk a little bit about reception here. For the students, for some of the students, there was a recognition this was an extraordinary event. Everyone commented how wonderful it was to be able to come back together again and performing and attending and participating in live theater, and the sense of community which was generated and was at which was supporting this project, lifting it up, making it something different than an ordinary night in the theater. People also commented on how pleasurable it was to update an ancient story and to reinterpret it for today. And the students recognized as well that they were seeing me in action, learning about a traditional Asian form at the same time as that they were experiencing an American community, Jewish community production. Audiences similarly enjoyed the updating of the story, the technologies we mobilized, the choices of different viewing screens, and the merging of different aesthetic elements. And for the JCC, the most important element probably was the educational one, with the children in the preschool and in the after-school program being able to take workshops with us. We offered workshops in gamelan playing and as well as shadow puppetry, There was a participatory march in the Sunday matinee performance where all the kids dressed up in costume and were part of the spectacle of the Purim story and the sing-along as well. And this made everyone, I think, there was something in this production for everyone. And I guess that's Purim as well. Yeah, that Purim is a holiday for dressing up. It's also a holiday for drinking. It's a holiday for feasting, for giving presents and gifts to the poor and one's neighbors and friends, and recollecting people in one's community, and for imagining the past, a victorious moment for Jews, but also one in Barbara Benari's telling, at least, which enables us to have some sympathy for other people outside of the Jewish faith. So that's it for me. I look forward to questions and comments.
Thank you, Matthew, very much. That was really great and wonderful. I think Steve and Jenny could come back and turn on your video cameras if you like, so we could have a discussion. And I'm all three of you presented really amazing examples of Jewish spectacle and puppet theater. I had a couple of thoughts. And I'm trying to think of my questions. We have an interesting question from Chad Williams, but one thing, because there's been such an emphasis on Purim, is the way that we're talking about puppetry in ways that are very much connected with ritual and community, which is, of course, one of the deep roots of puppetry. And that's interesting to me that we're talking about Jews and puppetry in these contexts, but maybe those are the contexts where Jewish identity sort of emerges. There's, of course, many Jews in puppetry who are, just doing puppetry that's not connected with Jewish content. The other thing I thought of was there's a line in the Great Small Works show Muntergang and Other Cheerful Downfalls, where Zuni Maud and Yessel Cutler have created their first show on the Lower East Side in the 1920s. And someone says, and I think this is based on an historical record that I think Eddie Portnoy found, at last, the first Yiddish marionette theater, like it hadn't happened before, which is maybe not true, but there's this sense of puppetry not being historically part of Jewish culture and Jewish experience. And I wondered, just as a way to start this conversation, and also thinking weirdly of analogs with Islam and the way that supposedly Islam is supposed to be against the performance of the image, which is an interesting subject. But why is there this sense that Jews are coming late to the art of puppetry? Is that something that you've thought of, or do you have thoughts about? Any of our brilliant panelists? Matthew.
I could start and say that and there's something Jenny mentioned already, that there's big variation between different places where Jews live or different Jewish cultures. So in Istanbul, most of the puppeteers doing Karagöz during the 19th century were Jewish. They weren't doing Jewish stories necessarily, but it was a Jewish occupation. One of the most famous Portuguese puppeteers, Da Silva, was Jewish. It was a closet Jew. He came from a family which was forcibly converted, but probably was practicing Judaism secretly. He was executed because there were suspicions that he was practicing Judaism. And there probably were, among the wandering entertainers of 19th century Eastern Europe who were doing, we now talk about as klezmer music. There's probably some puppetry there. There's some evidence to back that up, doing juggling and puppetry and other kinds of things. But I think puppet companies which identified as Jewish companies and were performing Jewish plays linked to holidays, I think that's probably 20th century, I think.
Jenny or Stephen, do you have thoughts about this initial question that I have here?
Not about that one, but your thing about objects. So maybe you don't consider these objects, but so many Jewish customs center around food. And in a sense, those are animated things. Certainly at Passover, the foods are very symbolic on the Seder plate. At Hanukkah, you have latkes, and Purim, you have Haman's hat. And so that's a different kind of object than we normally think about, but they're certainly an important part of Jewish storytelling.
Right, and as someone sort of outside of Jewish culture, I remember going to my sister-in-law's shul and not having gone to a service and sort of being interested in the way the Torah scrolls were approached and handled, and like the reader, the little silver thing with a hand on it where you like, I thought, coming from my object performance interests, like, this is really interesting. But Jenny, do you have thoughts about this nature of the history of Jews and puppetry? Like, what are we talking about here in a way?
I don't know, but the thing that occurs to me is like, there are all these things that come out of pagan practices that are physically embodied practices. So like hitting the ground with greenery, or marching in a circle and shaking leaves to make the wind blow so there's rain. Like this is definitely in what we do. It's like, it's part of what you do. And then, yeah. So the other thing that is very funny is like, I've been asked to teach puppetry at places and then been accused of idolatry. Matthew, I don't know if you've had this experience, but like I've been at a school and be like, invited to make giant puppets or whatever. And then people were referring like, are you going to go in the room with the idols? So there's like all this tension. It's like, you asked me, like, I'm not worshiping these dolls. Like we're doing something else with them, but it's a tension for sure.
Could you elaborate upon this, being in idols? Like, what is that about? Is it worshiping a false god? Are we going back to Moses and the golden calf or something? Farther back. Okay.
Yeah, Abraham. I mean, do you want to tell this? Do you want to tell the story, Matthew? You went to day school.
Yeah, this is destruction of idols, right? Yeah, Abraham. This is where he breaks with his family and goes on the road. It's over this idol which has no mouth and cannot speak and has no eyes, so can't see. Right. This is the defining moment of monotheism. Yeah. I mean, there is, I think, continually, this has come up in the questions chat, a continual slippage, right? A fear that if one venerates something too much, it becomes an idol. And these are their internal debates within Judaism about these sacred objects, right? You kiss the Torah, right? Are you anthropomorphizing the Torah? Are you making it into a person or making it into a deity, right? So these are questions within the faith.
Anat and Itan Marcus say, what about the Golem from Prague, which is, of course, this amazing story about creating an entity, a being out of, I think, clay, and it comes to life, and it's sort of early pre-Frankenstein kind of object becoming real. And then Maggie Winston, our puppeteer friend from Montreal, we're getting a lot of comments. This is great. Would a puppet be considered too much like an idol? Which I guess is what you're talking about. Has there ever been any conflict or backlash regarding puppetry in Jewish culture about this? Jenny's nodding her head. Oh, and we're not hearing you because you're...
I have to put in my earbuds because I'm in a house with other people who are preparing food. Just a second.
Yeah, I mean, I've gotten a lot of shade Let's just say that. Like, people are just like, what are you doing with those idols? Like, off, like, you know, what? Like, and this is mostly where you bump up against more traditional, I find in more traditional settings. Like, they'll be doing all kinds of funky things with objects, flags, fire, as we talked about earlier, you know, torches, I don't know, all kinds of things. But when it comes to physical representation, I think this is what you were getting to, John, like in Islam, like you're not going to make in our show, okay, just to give you an example, the Moshe Nadir, who is a writer for Zunimod and Yassel Cutler, wrote this play where God is featured. And in our play, like, God's played by a chandelier. Like, there's not going to be a picture of anybody. It's going to be like light. And, you know, that was a very conscious choice for me. Like, no, we're not going to have a, you know, that Moshe Nadir didn't write that, but there was like no way that we were going to have a representation of something with a beard.
Jenny, we had a comment that your pearls are clicking, which is
thank you.
They're great pearls. And then this is a comment question from Sarah Willen, who's asking about your collaboration with Meyer Kirschenblatt. Sarah studied with Barbara Kirschenblatt from the amazing scholar, and we could talk about her for a long time. And I know Jenny, you studied with BKG at NYU. She says the extraordinary performance you've shared with us, the Toy Theater show you based on Meyer Kirschenblatt's paintings, was completely new to me. Could you talk a little bit more about that collaboration?
Sure. So Meyer Kirschenblatt worked in a wallpaper and paste store in Toronto. He's a survivor of the Second World War. His family perished. They were fleeing. They actually had a debt to like a 400-pound gangster on some leather that his father defaulted on. And so they had to flee Poland, and it saved their immediate family's life. Anyway, he set up a wallpaper and paint shop in Toronto for many years, but he was a storehouse of memories. And he painted, you know, like he would be in the Schwitz, whatever, his Jewish community center with his other mates, and they would start talking about the war and whatever. And he was just like, no, I have many more memories. Photographic memory. And he was a fascinated kid who would run around looking at everything. So like the lady who was the kleptomaniac in the market, who would like the rich lady who would like steal a fish, and everyone knew she was stealing things, but whatever, she was part of the town. And then like, how are the animals, you know, what is husbandry like? And how do people who are illiterate keep their books on their boots by writing with chalk? And, you know, he noticed everything. And finally his daughter, Barbara, and his wife, Dora, made him take a painting class. So finally he could use all this wallpaper and paint stuff that he was doing to paint. That in the beginning, you'll notice the hand-painted wallpaper. That's like what he did. And so he painted 1,000 paintings, which is, there's a book called They Called Me Meyer July. And it's, you know, his memory of a pre-war childhood in a Yiddish town. And it's like incredible detail.
Great, thank you. I'm thinking that the video that you shared might be available online. So maybe we can share that. I don't know if Emily has that. So that
it's in the Great Small Works website. If you go to our website, greatsmallworks.org, it's actually on Vimeo it's by a company called Media Combo who shot it, but the full thing is there.
Okay, great. So greatsmallworks.com.
Also, we did a show of it like for a festival, and I don't know if you remember, but it was much longer, and we had many, many more paintings of his. And we finally, you know, for the film, we made it much shorter, but it was an epic.
Yeah, I love the way that you transformed Meyer Kirschenblatt's paintings of these really amazing images and stories of shtetl life into toy theater. That was a really successful transformation.
Meyer did that. He started it because he participated in our Toy Theater Festival.
Right.
And so he was the one who chose that story of the white pajamas about the little boy. I mean, what happens in the story is that the little boy wears the white pajamas his whole life because the father goes to a Rebbe and says, like, what should I do to have the kid live? And he's like, oh, dress him in white pajamas his whole life, and the angel of death will think that he's already dead and he won't take him. And so the kid wore white pajamas forever. Like him and Meyer would be running around town, like doing whatever. The kid was wearing white pajamas. I won't tell you how it ends.
Right. Good. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for clarifying that Meyer did that first version of his work in toy theater. Our friend Carol Sterling from New York has a question more for Matthew, I believe. She's wondering whether the Yukon Puppet Arts project with the East Hartford JCC will be documented as a model for puppetry training schools and local community centers, secular and or religious affiliation, to develop their own theme projects. Such fabulous energy.
Oh, thanks. I appreciate that. There will be a YouTube video which will be out. There are something like 6 different ways of shooting the show, focusing on different camera screens. So putting it together is pretty epic. But yeah, I hope to write about it as well. I think it's a really interesting model. But working and you've done a lot of work, Jenny, with different kinds of community centers over the years. I think it's really satisfying working with a story which is known to the people in that community, bringing in different kinds of perspectives on that. And then the gift of the Purim narrative, right? Is that
Except sometimes it can become so annoying. Like if you've done Purim Spielen for 30 years, like sometimes it's like, I don't want to hear about these people. I don't want to look at them. Like, because, in the Hasidic communities, they tell other stories. They don't necessarily do the Book of Esther. They tell other stories. So, let's do something about horse thieves, whatever.
My father was an amateur playwright, and he had a Purim Spiel every year. I didn't mention that, another autobiographical thing. And he invited members of the community to do readings of his plays. And no rehearsals, just reading from scripts. And it was scatological and often bordering on pornography, very political. But it wasn't the story of Esther after a while. It was, just the characters. So Achashverosh would appear, but so would Jesus. And Jesus's mother and father would also take on a role. And then whatever the political figure of the time was, or the scandal of the month would appear. But the frame was there at the back of people's minds, but it was never actually told the stories after some years.
That reminds me of the work that Jenny's done with the Afzalaka Spectacle Committee and those Purim Spiel. It reminds me of what you're saying, Matthew, just sort of go off. And there's this structure kind of in the background, but then what's happening, and for me, very confusing, not coming from a Jewish background, like, wait a minute, what's this about? But I appreciate you're talking about how the traditional performance and traditional performance structures sort of become the scaffold on what something entirely different can be constructed, maybe. I wanted to note that there was a comment from, Ronnie Wasserstrom saying Simchas Torah, dancing around with the Torah, thinking of object performance that is dressed up and that it's behind a curtain and revealed, so that the Torah scroll definitely an object with life. That's so interesting. I appreciate our friend puppeteer Chad Williams saying the age-old question for American Jews, Haman or Haman? What are you Steve, is there a...
Well, getting to that, I don't have a solution. I mean, I'm no expert on pronunciation of that stuff, but I was well into my adult years when I found out that Hadassah was Esther. There's a Jewish women's organization called Hadassah that's very famous, but I had no idea that was the name of Esther. It's like that. I didn't make that connection.
Great.
One of the things I got from working with the Jewish Community Center was Hebrew coaching. And I was told very clearly it's Haman. It's not Esther, it's Esther, like in Fred Astaire.
But it also varies by region.
Yeah.
So like in Yiddish,
I'm so old that when I was in Hebrew school, they called the skull kapiyamato, which is, I guess, a Yiddish term. And now you just don't say that. You have to say kippah, which is, I guess, the Hebrew correct term for the same item of ritual wear. So do things change as time evolves. And there's such a spectrum of Jewish practice. One of my favorite New Yorkers is a completely non-practicing, uninformed Jewish person. And at the other end of the spectrum, you have somebody like Mark Levinson, who has become more and more involved in following every law that the Torah has. And so you have a wide spectrum of practice within the Jewish tradition.
I wanted to note that some of our participants making comments, Anat, Anita, and Marcus mentioned Jacob made symbolic images in front of the sheep, about which I know not very much. And Judy Silver wants a shout out to the Yukon Puppet Museum Center, which I think is the Ballard Institute, and we're sponsoring this. So thank you. And Faye Ringel says, Hadassah was founded on Purim, and the name is a deliberate homage to the great hero Hadassah, who took the assimilated name Esther. Many theorize that this was actually the name of the goddess Ishtar, going back to Jenny's thinking about pagan roots, I think, and it's very, very rich and deep here. I'm wondering if you have any, because we're sort of getting to the end of our time here, if you have any questions for each other, and or comments, or overall brilliant analytical thoughts you'd like to share with us at this moment. I'm struck by the richness of this discussion and the thought that I'm thinking. I'm sort of just at the beginning of trying to figure this subject out a bit.
Well, I'd like to give a big compliment to Matthew. I think the idea of putting those things together makes perfect sense. And I didn't know the detail that you had the clown be the translator into English, which is right out of the Indonesian tradition. And it just works perfectly. That's gorgeous.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. And again, thinking about it, this is an educational project that a lot of the people there were learning Hebrew, right? So it validates that experience and seeing it in an entertaining way, the text and the translation, and the exegesis. And I hope that other people will pick this up and take it further.
Any plans to do Exodus after this one?
Oh, we have all kinds of plans to get to the Jewish Community Center. And apparently there's a whole network of these Jewish community centers around the US. So it get known. But I think that's also one of the pleasures of working with, coming from the UK, where I lived for 20 years or so, where everything is dependent on public money. And the expectation is that all the arts are going to be supported by the state. And in the US, it's a very different kind of landscape for making theater. And to be able to work together with a community which is very generous philanthropically, very interested in creating work alongside of artists, and in welcoming artists into the family. This is something which people at the Jewish Community Center were telling me. I think it's an opportunity, right? It's a kind of it's a remarkable opportunity to reimagine what you do, and to work in a way which I always associate with the past, this relation of patronage, right? That you're working at the bequest of some religious community. But I think it's a very empowering way to make art, right? We're making art which is deeply resonant with a community of faith.
And I also think Purim, like Carnival, is a chance to project forward, and it's abolitionist in the way of it is an embodiment of what we want. So like, because we gather people together, like the thoughts I have related to, first of all, Steve, I'm just so grateful to you for this research you've done, and I can't wait to look at all of it. And I just honor you for chronicling all of this history, and it's incredible. And all those geniuses that you shared with us. I want to know about all of them, but just the thing about, like, I don't know how long you studied in Java, like over 7 years probably. So, that's a depth of, and you went to day school. So this isn't like you're just casually creating an intercultural thing. This is like you have thrown down with your life to have a deep commitment to these things. And I think that's important. That it's not a casual relationship. It's like you have you know, the points of intersection are very deep and come from study. And so I feel like, you know, there are, in the Purim Spiel and we do, in the Afzalakis Spectacle Committee and with Jews for Racial and Economic Justice, and Great Small Works, it's a lot about gathering people from different communities, clearly a Jewish project, but trying to create a situation in which we can be together and think together and create new culture together. So it's an old story, but it's using that to create something that wouldn't happen unless we made it happen, because we're segregated.
Thank you, Jenny, for your insights. I think we're getting to the end of our program, our forum here. Wanted to note that Anat and Itan Marcus say Esther is from Nistar, which I think they're saying in Hebrew means hidden. And then Ronnie Wasserstrom asks, do you ever mix drinking with Purim play? Isn't there a rule about getting so drunk you don't know your name? And definitely, I know that happens in the Afzalakis Spectacle Committee's Purim Spiel, which with me coming from sort of a Protestant background, I sort of really appreciate it. Like, oh, wow, that's really cool. So that tradition continues. And I just want to thank everybody. I feel like I want to know more. Each of you have made these amazing contributions. We're looking forward to more contributions from all of you, from Matthew and your work, and Jenny from your ongoing work, most recently last week with this amazing parade in Brooklyn that you and your colleagues created, and Steve with all the amazing work you're doing as a puppeteer and as the editor of Puppetry Journal. And just that presentation about Jewish women in puppetry was really exciting. So I want to thank you. I want to mention that if you want to make a contribution to the Ballard Institute, we're ready to appreciate that. And an
important part of Purim is giving tzedakah. It's not just giving gifts, but it's also charity justice. So justice, if we want our institutions to survive, we have to support them. So I'm definitely going to make a contribution.
And thank you, everybody, for listening. Feel free to sign up to be on our mailing list. Come visit us. You know, we don't know where we are in the long COVID situation, but come to the Ballard Institute. I want to thank my colleague, Emily Wicks, who's been backstage making things happen. It's amazing. We're really honored to work with Emily, and Matt Sorensen, our undergraduate assistant, Anthony Solito. Carol Sterling says, would love to see this written up as an article for Puppetry Journal. So that's a message to Steve Abrams to make that happen. So thank you everybody for watching. Thank you, Jenny. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Matthew. Thank you, Emily. And we'll say good night, and come to our next puppet forum in April, which will be about Puerto Rican puppetry and Plena, and Tito Matos, the great Plena Plenero, who died a week ago, and whose life was celebrated by Agua Sol y Sereno, the Puerto Rican puppet company that's part of our current exhibition. So stay tuned and we'll hope to be with you soon. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you.